right, guys. Welcome to a very, very special Free Play Arcade podcast. It's me, Corey Hyden, president of Free Play, sitting down to discuss probably the most controversial issue we've ever talked about, including Billy Mitchell, the Arcade1Ups. We've been working on a big, massive review video that's taking a while in production, which, will be mildly negative, but I wanted to go ahead and take a little bit more long-form approach to some of the issues as we get into the holiday season and as we come to the end of the year. This podcast is sponsored by nobody, and I'm here speaking just kind of as myself. And I didn't want to have anyone else on the podcast with me because I wanted to make sure that we didn't gang up or we didn't kind of build on each other's energy as we dislike these Arcade1Ups. So I'm going to address a lot of the issues that have been brought up, a lot of the concerns about our opinions, and I'm also going to kind of talk about what Arcade1Ups now look like a few months in. And I guess as an initial starting point, we've been accused a lot of just being biased because we work for an arcade and we're nervous that somehow the Arcade1Ups are going to affect our business. And I guess, I want to make sure I say, I don't think that that's true as we think that people will play Arcade1Ups instead of coming to a cool retro arcade that has, great music, great drinks, food, all of that stuff, including also, 100 plus of the original games. That's not our big concern. Our big concern is that when a company releases a bad version of the games, poor emulation or poor controls, especially in a total arcade setup like Arcade1Up is doing, it could permanently affect, especially the target demographic for these Arcade1Ups, children. It could permanently affect how they view these games. So games like Galaga, Pac-Man, these all-time classic games, we want to make sure they're presented in the appropriate and best way so that these kids realize how great of a game they are, instead of kind of being shortchanged by having, again, poor controls, bad emulation, bad screens, all of that. We find that if you present these games in their best format, they're universally loved, just like they were in the 80s. But what we also find is when they're presented poorly, for example, before Arcade1Ups, one of the big issues was the 16-1 multi-boards that you can find on the internet. These illegal emulation boards, they just didn't present the games how they were intended to be played. And ultimately, it definitely affected people's views of what these games were supposed to be. So that's our big concern in terms of from a commercial standpoint. We do think Arcade1Ups, given some of the issues that I'm going to go into later, could negatively affect our business. So yes, we are concerned from a business standpoint, not because somehow they're going to replace the social aspect of our arcades. And for those of you, and we've made a bunch of videos trying to address this and concerned or skeptical as to our credibility in terms of arcades or anything, Free Play Incorporated, of which I'm the boss, the president, the CEO, now has an arcade collection valued in the millions of dollars. More than 1,000 of the greatest retro arcades of all time. And all running original hardware, all of that kind of stuff. We have 3 locations. We're working on our 4th and 5th right now. We both know arcades really, really well, and we've always put the games first. And we've been known generally as the first people to bring a purist view to these games and still give them to the public. We let the public pay $10 to come into one of our locations, for example, and play an original Atari Quantum running all original hardware, one of the rarest arcade games and best arcade games that's ever existed. And you can just walk up and play it as much as you'd like after paying $10. And we maintain it and we present it in almost as factory original condition as you might find. And when I say that, though, I do want to make sure I note that we do have a great nostalgia for some of the arcades where you'd walk in and the games would look a little worn, but they'd work perfectly, which was common in the 80s and early 90s. So we do have games that have wear and tear, but still function perfectly, which I think that there's a great connection there. So I don't want to imply necessarily that all of our games look factory fresh, but they do all play as close to factory fresh as possible. We spend hundreds to thousands of hours every year sourcing games, parts. Our part collection alone, again, is more than 1 million inventoried pieces. And we are dedicated to keeping these games going as long as possible in their original format. We've had questions about monitors and everything. We have the largest collection of CRT monitors, probably at least in arcade condition CRT monitors that I think exists. We have hundreds and hundreds, including more than 100 brand new CRTs. So we do get questions every once in a while to say, hey, how are you possibly going to keep this going? Isn't the technology eventually going to have to change so that you also run LCDs like the Arcade1Up runs? And the answer is, I don't think that's going to happen during my lifetime, or at least not hopefully till I am quite old. So that's how committed we are to delivering this product, and it's been a resounding success. We have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that visit FreePlay every year. We're incredibly proud of the product we offer, but it is our belief, our core belief, that if you present these games in their best possible format, the original format, people will love them. And so far, that has been true. So that's one of the reasons we are skeptical anytime of poor emulation. And just hearing the specs, hearing kind of what Arcade1Up was going to do in our last podcast, that's why we were able to predict. And if you go back and you watch this podcast, we predicted things quite well as to the condition, the quality, and everything that was to come. So a lot of people dumped on us for not actually owning it. Of course, we own the deluxe Arcade1Up 12-in-1. We've spent a lot of time playing the Street Fighter 2 Arcade1Up. In general, we've been exposed to every single Arcade1Up. We've tested them all in different ways. So now we definitely have enough hands-on time to kind of look back at that last podcast and say, we were pretty close. We were pretty accurate as to what was coming. So that's kind of our bias. Yes, we are concerned that it'll affect our business, but more by negatively affecting or even running these games for a new generation. And I guess that's the next question I want to go to is a lot of people have said, listen, you're criticizing what amounts to a kid's toy. It's a short, tiny little arcade that isn't clearly intended to be played by children, because even like the 3-person Arcade1Ups could never have 3 adults, and it would be kind of a stretch to have 3 children playing it at once, at least comfortably. And perhaps that's a fair criticism of what we've brought forth. These are kids' toys, but when Arcade1Up came to the market, they were $300 to $400, and that's an expensive kids' toy. And parents buying that for their kids are expecting, arcade quality games. And in fact, Arcade1Up all over their website, all over their publicity materials have said this is like arcade quality, arcade perfect, blah blah blah. That has been used. Those exact phrases have been used by Arcade1Up. So while it might not be fair from a standpoint of a consumer buying it for their kid to criticize it for not being arcade quality, Arcade1Up, they're the ones who said it was arcade quality. So our criticism is not shifting consumer expectations. It's of the actual publicity materials put up by Arcade1Up. So that kind of addresses, yes, it's a kid's toy, but if we can only criticize it based on how Arcade1Up has decided to market it, which is not as a kid's toy. It's clear to us, and I think clear to most, that Arcade1Up is kind of marketing this as a nostalgia kind of trick, gimmick to get people who've always wanted to own their arcade but didn't want to deal with the hassle that we've discussed before. Now, they're not the first people, and I'm sure they won't be the last people to come up with this idea. We've had tons and tons of reproduction cabinets, multi-cabinets, inexpensive things that are sold at Sam's or Costco almost every year. There's 12-in-1 Williams that I thought was, better than the Arcade1Ups, but okay. And I think that was priced around $400 originally. Those kinds of inexpensive small cabinets that are running inexpensive hardware, inexpensive components, inexpensive emulation. So they haven't done a lot of work themselves on the emulation. They just dumped ROMs, got a cheap board, had it run, and let people play it. We've criticized those in the past too. They are generally considered as toxic as it gets in the arcade world, and they haven't made no impact on things like arcade prices or anything like that, or even in terms of people trying to find the original games. The fact that these previous versions of what is basically the Arcade1Up exist has not changed people's desire to own the real arcade games, at least in the last 10 years, while we've seen demand skyrocket for the real thing. So that's another issue that I wanted to make sure I tackled, that no, it's not that we think that they're going to negatively affect the arcade market. It's really they're going to negatively affect the games. So I have also wanted to make sure I did a quick note. I know we've had a lot of personal attacks on both the employees of FreePlay and myself individually. Generally, that doesn't affect me at all. So, feel free to let in on me. I know how I look. I know what I do. I know that, I am the president of a successful entertainment company focused on running real arcade components. And my background, of course, is was one of the most successful young litigators in DFW prior to opening this arcade. So that's what I am, and I'd be happy to defend myself against y'all, but I'm probably not going to. We've had some additional comments come in that say, listen, you can find these games for $150 or $100 now. So stop criticizing them at that point. At that price point, it's a good deal. And it is true. Retailers have generally slashed prices of these Arcade1Ups. They're popping up for $75, $100, $150, depending on the model. Some of it's store specific. Other stores, such as, I believe it was Costco, I believe, decided to pull out of their Arcade1Up deal entirely because of the numerous issues that I'm going to get to later that were cropping up with these units, and found generally that the Arcade1Up manufacturer, which is the same company that has Bright Hatchimals, it's a Tastemaker. It's just a toy company. Arcade1Up is a toy. Costco, it appears, and I don't have any firsthand knowledge, but it appears that Costco pulled out of their deal generally over concerns of quality, where Costco, warrants their products, and they generally will allow you to return them later. Then the manufacturer would necessarily support them and everything. I believe, and this is just rumors based on the internet, that Costco pulled out due to issues that were popping up on Arcade1Ups, and we are about to get to those. One last thing I want to address is there have been a lot of points that said, look, some people are having fun with these, and when you criticize them, you're ruining someone's fun. And to that issue, I want to make sure I say, whether or not the Arcade1Up is a good deal, a good product, or good support, it's all separate of whether or not you can have fun messing around with them. The core level of these games is great. The games that they're using are great, and we have all of the original ones all on the floor at Free Play, and we play them regularly. So those are great, and I imagine some people will have fun with them. And I hope nothing that I say on the internet is necessarily going to ruin your fun. But I do think it's important to be realistic with what we're dealing with here, which is a company that brought a $300 to $400 product to the market that was, just completely destroyed with various issues, that had all sorts of problems coming to market, for one, staying on the market, additional support issues, and there's long-term support concerns with Arcade1Ups generally. So just because some of these games can be fun, no matter how you put them in there, doesn't mean A, that they're doing the games justice, or B, that you can't have fun with them. So I'm not here to take away your fun. I'm just here to be realistic about a product that has had some very interesting internet followings, interesting internet coverage. And that's what I'm going to slide into right now. So one of my very first criticisms of Arcade1Up, and we talked about this in the last podcast, and we've talked about this before, Arcade1Up, which I can only assume it was the company behind it, Tastemakers, they've astroturfed the entire internet. They they sent free Arcade1Ups to a ton of influencers, right? And had them just ask them to make videos about them. And of course, when an influencer receives, especially some of these smaller influencers that receive these free units, receives a free unit that's worth $300 or $400, or is being sold for $300 or $400, that's going to necessarily cause them to be more positive than you'd expect. And of course, they didn't send these to arcade people generally. They sent them to just your generic social media people that talked about maybe geeky things, maybe technology. The same kind of people that they're probably targeting with the product, which I guess I should briefly mention. I am aware this is not targeted to people who are into arcades. It's targeted to kids as a toy. I understand the product that's being released. I also understand the price point of $300 and $400. So let's hop right into Tastemakers paid or rewarded people, whether or not it was money or products or whatever. They rewarded people to go on the internet and say positive things about their product before they even used it. And if you go look at the Walmart reviews on their website, the early reviews before Arcade1Up was released, there were 50, 60, 70 5-star reviews, all saying that they were doing it as part of a contest and that they love the product. Now, I'm a realist. I know this happens with all sorts of products, but as a preliminary taste in your mouth, that's not good. And yes, Arcade1Up sent, I don't even know, hundreds, thousands of these Arcade1Ups to these influencers to review. Almost all of the review videos are generally positive. Interestingly enough, a lot of the review products they sent out were pre-manufactured, pre-built, so that the influencer didn't actually have to go through the rather tedious process of building these and dealing with things that don't fit well together, which, of course, flat pack furniture, which is what the Arcade1Up is never perfect. So you can understand why they'd want to put their best foot forward, send it to them completely built. And most of the reviewers didn't spend a lot of time trying to go into the hardware or anything, just generally said nice things, which is a good, the marketing by tastemakers. So that was where we started with the game. We knew with the Arcade1Ups, we knew they were going to be cheap emulation, and then Tastemakers was throwing all these kind of weird marketing ploys and tricks and gimmicks to make it appear as though more people liked it than could possibly actually like it because they hadn't been released yet. And we warned about trying to support thousands of arcade type units in our previous podcast. And of course, shortly after release, Tastemakers completely shut down their support because they were overwhelmed. They released these products, they released the Arcade1Ups, and they were rife with issues that we're going to go through. But they had to shut down their support. There were so many problems. They had to just say, we will get to you all eventually. We're not answering the phones anymore. All of that. That's not surprising given the product they released. But clearly Tastemakers, as we're about to see, I think, did not do sufficient testing, play testing, and really rushed these items out to market and did not build the support base or maybe even stock enough support products to adequately support the Arcade1Ups. Okay, so getting to the issues of the Arcade1Ups that we've seen pop up, beyond any support issues, beyond anything that you say about Tastemakers, this is the product they actually released, and these are the issues that have come up. So we spoke, and I can't remember if the monitor was a 2005 model or 2006, but we spoke previously about how the monitors were going to be not very good. One of the things we didn't really predict were how many monitor failures with stuck pixels and everything would come out. And this is based on reading a bunch of support forums for Tastemakers and for Arcade1Up. Originally, they were replacing monitors pretty freely. If someone had a stuck pixel or anything like that, they'd replace them. And then people started calling in and they'd open up support tickets. And I think Tastemakers, and this is speculation, but it appears Tastemakers did not have or does not have as many monitors as are having issues to be replaced by their support team. They've now changed it so that you have to have 5 stuck pixels in one clump. So if you have 5 pixels in different spaces, it's not sufficient under their current support rules. You have to have 5 stuck pixels in one clump. And I can tell you that the internet is full of people who have had, 10 stuck pixels in different clumps or 5 stuck pixels in 5 different spots that are pretty upset over this. And of course, I'm not aware, and I haven't ever seen a batch of new LCDs, and I have seen new LCDs being built in bulk. I've never seen very many coming off on a assembly line that would have 5 stuck pixels in one clump. So I think that was a move the Tastemakers did pretty much to avoid having to send as many monitors as I think that they should have. They also, the warranty language on their website changed not long before it actually launched, and the warranty is quite short. I think it's at 90 days now, and that's not long at all for the types of issues. And one of the interesting things is when Tastemakers released the units, they created a warranty that if they were bought around release day and then given to the people for Christmas, they generally would be coming out of the warranty as these presents were opened. And to their potential defense, Tastemakers does seem to have I've not seen a lot of people talking about being rejected for it being out of warranty yet. So I'm not sure if that's an issue, but a 90-day warranty on a product that is this technical and this expensive, $300 to $400, is, of course, modern console levels of cost. So it should be judged against that same backdrop. So yeah, they've changed their monitor thing. There's lots and lots of issues with the monitors. Ours, I don't believe, has a stuck pixel. It might have one stuck pixel on our deluxe model. I've seen other issues, or I've seen other versions even walking around Walmart or whatnot that had numerous stock pixels. But if you have one clump of 5, that's the new level for tastemakers to replace it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not them, and I'm not privy to any specifics of exactly what's going on in the backdrop, but it does seem to me that they were giving away more monitors early for still legitimate issues, and they've really, really tightened up their policy because there's just not that many of these monitors that exist, would be my guess. All right. The second issue I want to talk about is just kind of their failure to test the units. So there's generic emulation, obviously. All of the units use some version of MAME. Some of the units, I believe the Street Fighter and the Galaga cabinets, they use what's called Mu, which is like a DRM'd version of MAME. But it appears that they're all just using MAME, which is just off-the-shelf, open source emulation. Which I'm not saying they should have completely reinvented the wheel here, but one of the things they did mess up on is it looks like their ROM choice on a number of these games was wrong or bad. And they've picked one of the bad ROMs for Gauntlet, right? So it's a pretty big issue. I won't go too deep into it. The Rampage cabinet that featured Gauntlet, when it was released, it crashed at level 31 every time. You can go on the internet if you search for that ROM. You can find the ROM they used. They just used a corrupt ROM, a known bad ROM. That would have been really easy to catch in testing. Generally, they have replaced these boards or tried to update them or tried to fix them. But the wait times are weeks, if not longer. And there are plenty of Gen 1 Rampage cabinets sitting across the United States still that are never going to get updated because they're going to be out of warranty quite soon, or that it won't be noticed until it's too late. So they should have caught that issue. The level 31 issue might not seem major to you right now watching this, but that means that if eventually someone decided, I really want to get into Gauntlet, and it's past their 90-day window, that Gauntlet is, stuck forever, and it's broken in level 31, which, given the settings and given how you can just keep going on these games, that would be very disappointing. So that was just a complete failure to test. The next ROM issue that I want to address, which has become quite a hot button issue lately, is the Galaxina Rom on their Galaga cabinet. So immediately upon release, some of the arcade people said the Galaxian doesn't look right. And it turns out the easiest way to tell is the ship in Galaxian on a real Galaxian has a little red tip and a little red firing area. On this Galaxian, it was white or gray on the Arcade1Up Galaxian. So you have these two, and people searched through every version of a Galaxian that's ever existed and couldn't really find one, at least that I'm aware of, that matched the colors of Galaxian on the Arcade1Up. So they started doing some investigation into the ROMs. And while they were, and this is unfortunately one of the cabinets that is protected through the Mu DRM system, but while they were looking into these ROMs, the Galaxian, the CPU file for the Galaxian does not match any known Galaxian CPU. And we've heard lots of explanations, lots of theories, and I'm not going to go through them at all. But the bottom line when it comes to this Galaxian is it does not match any Galaxian that we know that exists just naturally. If we went and dumped the code from our Galaxian, one of our Galaxian machines that we have on the floor, it would not match anything. It would not remotely resemble the code that is in the Arcade1Up. Whereas the Galaga, on the other hand, would, which is kind of strange. The Galaga seems to be just a nice, normal version of Galaga that they put onto the Arcade1Ups, the ROMs. But Galaxian, no. And there is speculation right now. The color palette on the Galaxian ROM in the Arcade1Up matches perfectly the Galactron, the French knockoff Galaxian that was released in France. It was not licensed. It was just a complete knockoff game, which were common in the 80s for popular games. But it's a pretty big coincidence that these games match so well. Investigation into the ROMs has not really yielded any yes or no answers. Just kind of, we know this isn't Galaxian, or at least the Galaxian that we're all used to. So, and we don't know why. So, again, tastemakers failed to adjust for that ROM. They failed to test for the Gauntlet ROM that crashes. They probably don't really have too many people in their team that cared which version of Galaxina was. I don't know if it's a knockoff. I don't know if it's a corrupt ROM, because there are another thing that's been cropping up, and I found at least 30 posts where people are complaining about Galaxina crashing all the time. So maybe it's just a corrupt ROM. We don't know. So nevertheless, this was really lazy. This is something that could take 20, 30 minutes of one employee's time to get these ROMs right. And on neither one of these games, the ROMs appear to be correct. So the next issue I want to talk about, and guys, I hope y'all have brought some beverages, some snacks, because there's a long list of issues that I'm going to be going through here. The overlay issue is notorious. The overlays that they put on these Arcade1Ups were not designed to actually be used, not designed to be played. And you can see on any test model on any floor that didn't have a protector over it, the overlays they put on the games are worn within a day or two. So they've now released all these different protectors and everything. And some of the newer versions come with the protectors. Well, and I don't think the protectors are as attractive as the other ones. And they could have printed it on actual control panel overlay material that would have lasted fine. But they just kind of took a really, really cheap way out and tried to save some money. And yes, they are trying to send protectors out to everyone who complains. The biggest issue I see on the internet right now is there's people that have been waiting 6 to 7 weeks for these. Some are getting within 2, but others are having to wait 6 to 7 weeks. And there's plenty of people who have ordered 1 and received 4 or 5, and they just keep coming. These overlays keep coming. So there's clearly an issue on the internals there, but it should have never happened. Any real playtesting, if they put one of these units out in the real world for a day or two, which they did after they released it, but not before, they would have noticed this is a major issue and hopefully corrected the units before they came to the public. And again, with so many unopened original first generation units floating around, they're probably going to be able to avoid having to actually replace all of the overlays. So, and originally they had announced that the new overlays they're releasing would come with the new artwork to replace it. Now it looks like they're just releasing plastic clear overlays. No matter what, it was a totally messed up release. And another example of the Arcade1Up team not testing their unit before they released it to the public. The next issue I'm going to talk about is more the internal support issues that have been touched on by some of these other issues. But so Tastemakers was sending warranted parts to Canada. And of course, I mean, I'm not going to say necessarily that it's an unexpected amount of monitors failing, PCBs failing, issues out of the box. I think it's quite high, but I don't have any of the specific information. But I do know everything that went to Canada that they warranted, they ended up accidentally sending the posts the wrong way with customs owed. So people would receive these parts that they needed that were just to fix a broken part, and the postal service would be asking them for $100 or $200. And then Tastemakers had to send out an emergency notice saying, just refuse all the shipments. We'll try to get it right the next time. And obviously, if you're a Canadian who's been waiting 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks for their parts, and then they get a request for $100+, and then Tastemakers freaking out and telling you just to refuse it, that's not great support. That's not great service. So just another example of Tastemakers being either ill prepared for what would have been normal service, or having more issues than expected and not being able to sufficiently service them. All right, so the next issue that we're going to touch on is the spinners. We, of course, have a spinner on our deluxe cabinet, and there have been some YouTube videos trying to explain what's going on and trying to give tips to make them better. The spinner that came on our deluxe cabinet is the worst spinner, and I'm talking about the control where you can use it like a dial, which would commonly be found in games like Tempest. It is so bad. I can't even express how terrible it is. And we've tried to loosen it, which is one of the tips that's recommended, and we've tried to oil it. Ultimately, it's just a extremely inexpensive spinner, not something you should be finding on. Now, our deluxe cabinet's a $400 unit. This is not something that we should be dealing with. And the spinner itself is terrible in its feel, but it also, and this has been reported on numerous cabinets, for Tempest and Major Havoc, 2 all-time great games. You can find them both at Freeplay Richardson. You can find Tempest at all Freeplay locations. Tempest and Major Havoc just for whatever reason, the movement does not track properly on the spinner that was sent with the cabinet. We have this issue with the deluxe cabinet, and I've read numerous complaints on the Asteroids cabinet. And in fact, there is an open support issue on the Reddit Arcade1Up page talking about this exact problem. So I don't think it's unique. It just doesn't track where your player is supposed to be. And both Major Havoc and Tempest are fast games. They're fast. You want to be able to move exactly where you want to be able to move. It would have cost a few extra dollars to get a quality spinner, but cost-cutting measures or whatever happened in creating these Arcade1Ups, the spinner feels terrible and it doesn't actually track the movement properly. And again, this isn't just us complaining. There are numerous complaints on the internet about this exact problem. That's a shame because, of course, Tempest, I was just saying, is one of the greatest games of all time. Major Havoc was used as a conversion with a spinner, but traditionally actually had a cool roller. And if you want to play it, again, I recommend going to Free Play Richardson, a dedicated original Major Havoc, one of the few in the state period, and definitely one of the very few dedicated cabinets that is available to play to the public. So really cool games, both color vectors that, of course, don't look great on the LCD that came with the Arcade1Up. But ultimately, the movement control basically ruins these games. It makes them virtually unplayable, and it certainly detracts from how great these games are. So the spinner is a major problem. And then I also want to kind of talk about on Lunar Lander, there's no real thrust control. There's kind of an on and an off. And if you ever played a dedicated or original Lunar Lander, it had this huge thrust control. What a lot of people have done that would, it worked on a potentiometer and it sent signals based on where it was as you pushed forward to get more thrust or less thrust. And it's one of the all-time great arcade games and really, really addictive and fun. So Arcade1Up, there doesn't seem to be any real thrust control. And a lot of people have asked why they didn't do what a lot of home arcade people have done that have implemented emulation before, which is attached to that spinner where you can get thrust control on the spinner. My theory, of course, and I don't mean to sound too harsh, is that Arcade1Up doesn't care. They're not super interested in actually creating a good playable version of these games. They were just trying to get licenses to make you buy the cabinets. I mean, a 90-day warranty, they get your money. They don't care that much whether or not Lunar Lander is a big game, because that's not one of their marquee games, right? That's not Centipede or Asteroids that they put on the side of the cabinet. It's just a bonus game, and the fact that it's unplayable just means that no one's ever going to try to play it properly because they're going to think that the game is kind of not good. So that's another example, Lunar Lander. So we're at least 3 games in. The Tempest, the Major Havoc, and Lunar Lander are basically unplayable, or at least not enjoyable in their current form presented by Arcade1Up. All 3 vector games, all 3 classic games that I don't expect someone who plays them on the Arcade1Up is going to care enough to seek out the real version, because they're just going to think that the game's not very good. This has been talked about quite a bit. This is another issue, but it has to be mentioned. On the Centipede, the Asteroids, and the deluxe cabinet, the 12-in-1, I think is what they call it, that we have, there are various sounds that do not sync with your actual gameplay. So you'll be firing a bullet, say in Centipede, and a half second later, you'll hear the pew. That just sucks. It does not make the game nearly as enjoyable as it could be, and it doesn't make the game feel nearly as responsive, right? Because your bullets, they come out when you press the button, the sounds for them come out later. And there's various other complaints about delayed sounds of any time between, very, very small delays to half-second delays. But the half-second delay on the fire butt or on the fire sound is notorious. You can find numerous people complaining about the internet, and we tested it on our deluxe cabinet. It's suffering from a similar issue. So it's not necessarily game-breaking, but these were not inexpensive units, guys. These are not discount arcades. These are not those little $30 ones that you can buy, which, for the record, all the little $30 tiny ones that we've bought played pretty well, especially when compared to the Arcade1Up. And that is just the same emulation, just with slightly better controls in a $30 package. I'm sure y'all are going to criticize me for comparing them, but I still can't believe that these tiny little tabletop cabinets that are maybe 6 to 12 inches tall can get the games right, whereas Arcade1Up can get them so wrong. On the Street Fighter cabinets, There's the notorious sound channel issue. I read someone online had figured out that if you splice if you solder one of the cables together, or you solder one of the channels together on the board, you can get 2 channel sound coming out of the speaker. Other people have soldered a new speaker onto it to actually create the 2 sounds. There are sound amp concerns in terms of actually getting your volume control. Because again, this was something we made fun of a lot in the first podcast. There's no real volume control on these cabinets. It goes from off, half, or full. But in Street Fighter, for example, if you're playing on the left side, your sounds aren't coming through, and there's only one speaker that's on the right side of the control panel. There are some people who've tried to hack that and fix it. There's no change planned that I'm aware of that I've been able to find to ever correct this issue. It's just something that you have to live with your Arcade1Up. And I understand why the internet's quite upset about it. It's a $4 or $5 fix to go ahead and clean up the speaker problems. So just another thing that should have been correct. There's no reason it didn't with the amount of money you're paying, but here we are. All right, so continuing on the sound channel issues, there is the Rampage cabinets where I believe they've at least, according to the internet, the support team at Tastemakers has been telling people that they accidentally lost the sound channel on Rampage, whereas Street Fighter's been kind of addressed, and that's just kind of the version that they are releasing, or at least that appears to be the opinion on the internet. On the Rampage cabinets, they said it was kind of an accident that they lost one of the sound channels. Now, you can fix it the same way that you can fix the Street Fighter. What's really interesting, though, is they released a revision of the Rampage PCBs because of that aforementioned gauntlet bug that crashed every time at level 31 or getting past level 31. So they revised it, and this time they lost the other sound channel. So they got you the one that they thought that they had lost back, but they lost the original. I think it's really just because they're treating these like mono games, given that there's only one speaker. But if you go online, there is a hack that involves soldering, which again, a lot of people criticized us for recommending just go buy a real arcade game because there could be work involved with it. And now we've got people soldering sound channels to try to create just what I think generally paid for. But that is another issue with the sound channels. I think, these are not nice games, right? These are not high-end games at all. And despite costing $300 or $400, and I do think that they should have been better, having a mono system is a disappointment, I think. But it is designed for one speaker. I don't know. The way Tastemakers is addressing it is more confusing to me than anything by bringing back one of the sound channels but losing the other. And we've confirmed this on our unit. The Atari Quantum ROM, I probably should have talked about it earlier when I was talking about the ROMs. There's some issue. After level 2, the way that they have the speed working, it just becomes virtually unplayable because it's almost impossible to make a little circle. And so by a quick background Atari Quantum, you play the game by circling little floating glowing pixels. And on an original color vector monitor, especially on the Amplifone monitors, that some of them came from the factory allegedly. Ours is an Amplifone. I don't know if it's a later replacement, but you circle the monitor, or you circle the pixels, and I don't mean to denigrate the 6100s, which was the other color vector that these came with. Both monitors are gorgeous, but you circle a little glowing pixel, you get points, and you're supposed to do it quickly, and you have a trailing line. Anyways, on these, certainly on the deluxe cabinet that has Quantum, the game speeds are all wrong. They're not adjusted for the modern processor that they're using and all of that. They're just kind of, it seems like guesswork almost at what speed they're playing the ROMs. And certainly in the case of Atari Quantum, it's virtually unplayable. And after level 2, it's bad. I don't know if it's the ROM choice, if it's the speed at which they have the game going, but if you go play a game like Centipede, even on the deluxe cab or the Centipede cab, the speed is wrong. And this is kind of a minor nitpick, but still, they said it was going to be arcade quality. They said that you're going to get the real arcade games, and having monumental speed issues that are just obvious and apparent to anyone who's played the game, and certainly if you have them side by side, it kind of sucks for a $300 to $400 product. So Atari Quantum's unplayable due to the speed problems, or they just picked a bad ROM. It's unclear because it's impossible to play after level 2 or 3. and it really starts feeling awful around that level 2 period. So this has been coming up more and more, and it's interesting. We have not, our units have not experienced this, but people are reporting losing games on some of their units over time, where either the address files on the selector become corrupted or the games themselves become corrupted. So, for example, there is a known defect that I was reading about just not long ago that a lot of people are complaining about. They lose Super Street Fighter to new challengers, which, I mean, we can all make fun of why we even want to play that game, but it is one of the games that comes on the Street Fighter Arcade1Up. People are losing it, and where they'll select the game on their menu and it'll go to a different game. I think normally it goes back to Hyper Fighting. Getting a replacement board, of course, taking 4 to 6 weeks. I think that this is probably a recall-worthy notice, and I wonder over the next 6 months if we're not going to see a ton of corrupted data causing massive issues with these Arcade1Ups. But again, this is a known issue. There's a big long thread talking about it on Reddit. There's a big long thread in the Arcade fan club on Facebook, which, just as a quick aside, I joined the fan club just to kind of wrap my head around what was going on with these games. And I think I kind of identified some of the issues that why people are so hostile when I talk about the Arcade1Ups or are critical of the Arcade1Ups. I recognize a lot of the emotions that people have when they buy these Arcade1Ups and they take them home and set up. As when I bought my very first cabinet. Now, my very first cabinet was a Devastators, a Konami Devastators, and a dedicated cabinet, but I got it for $100. The monitor was a little funky, but I thought it was kind of cool. It's kind of fun. I brought it home, and my original plan was, honestly, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, I thought I was just going to put like some sort of Raspberry Pi in it or a 16 one. I didn't really know, but I knew I liked arcades, and that kind of, though, I started to realize why people don't like the 16 ones. I bought a 16 one. It wasn't very good. I messed with emulation. I understood the limitations of emulation pretty quickly and realized, wow, I just want to play all the real games. But I was so proud when I brought home that Devastators, and I see these people posting their new arcades, right, in their man caves or their game rooms, and they're just really pumped because to them that's like when I first got that arcade. They love the concept of owning an arcade, and I think there are a lot of people in the country, obviously thousands, but that always dreamed of having that like arcade room where you had 10 or 15 of your favorite arcade games. And I think they're unfortunately, or maybe fortunately if they're enjoying them, Arcade1Ups are the easiest things on the market to get close. And now again, these are little 4-foot toys, but for people who've always wanted to have arcades in their game room, I can see the immediate allure of buying something for $200, $300, $400 or whatnot and having them set up. And I wish these guys all the best of luck. I know what that feeling is like, and they are all so positive that it must really, I can see why they would react so negatively to someone saying, yeah, but let's talk about all these problems, all these issues, and why this product might just be kind of a failed product, whether or not you've always wanted to know an arcade, whether or not you're buying it just to decorate your man cave, which does seem to be a lot of people. They don't care as much about playing the games. It's more about having something that looks like an arcade in their man cave. So I empathize with that a lot because, yeah, I did buy a game. I was planning on emulating it or doing something to it. And as I learned about these emulators, I realized they're just how lacking they can be. And so that is what started me on my process to now, owning a company that owns 1,000 arcade games. And running what I think are 3 of the best arcades in the entire world. So I empathize with it, and I understand, I think, because if someone was criticizing something that made me so happy, like when I brought home something that just satisfied a dream, even this is a bucket list thing, owning an arcade game, I would not be very pleased if I read online that it's not a real arcade game, it's a toy, it has a million different issues, the quality control on it was terrible. There are just, I am critical of Arcade1Ups, so I understand, I guess, where some people are coming from. Nevertheless, I think someone has to go ahead and make these videos. I think someone has to talk the truth about these Arcade1Ups, not just from a purist perspective, but just really lay it all out there and let the consumers decide, let the people decide, but with all the facts, all the knowledge. And I spoke just a little bit ago. So these Arcade1Ups are running on what looks like a virtually identical to what's called the and I'm spacing on the name right now. One of the big multi-boards, and it uses like a 1.1 gigahertz ARM processor, and it's the why can't I remember the name? I'll pull it up in a second. But so it's kind of a known processor set that is not expensive at all. They are I think you can buy them for $50-$60. They are preloaded with a bunch of illegal games, but come with 900 or 999 games or anything. It's the Pandora's box. I don't know why I'm spacing on it. The Pandora's box. It uses the same processor virtually as the Pandora's box, and that's interesting. We know that it's not an expensive processor. We know it's pretty cheap, but with that processor, again, I was talking. They didn't do any compensation, so you can buy a Pandora's box. And I don't think that the emulation is great, but they do seem to be compensating to deliver the games in the same speeds and the same sounds and everything that the original games did. This didn't exactly happen on the Arcade1Ups, but I have already talked about it, so I won't go too deep into it. Of course, on that Rampage cabinet, for whatever reason, they put a gorgeous, amazing original game, Williams Defender. Williams Defender is kind of what put Williams on the map. They later released Joust, Stargate, which was the sequel to Defender, Robotron, and a slew of other amazing games like Sinistar. Joust is not really playable on the Rampage cabinet. The controls are just it's difficult to use, and Defender used a very unique, very interesting control scheme, which some people criticize the original cabinet about, but at least it was playable. On this one, it's not really playable. I know not many people buy these to play Defender, but it's still a game that was marketed, a game that was put on it, and I would like it to be presented in a very good way because it's an all-time great game. I won't spend too much time lamenting the quality of the sticks and the buttons. I know people have talked about how you can replace them, you can change them, but that's not really the point of buying a $300 or $400 arcade to then start spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on replacement parts. The joysticks that come with it have huge dead zones. They're less responsive than a commercial joystick that you can buy for $15. You can buy it for probably $10, but the $15 would be really good compared to what you were given. The buttons, they're kind of notorious. They're just inexpensive buttons, guys. They're inexpensive buttons, inexpensive sticks. I'm not gonna again really go into it because they're just not good. There are people that have replaced them. There are people that have spent $100+ replacing all their control panel buttons and everything. They then spend another $100 or $200 replacing the emulation with the Raspberry Pi and getting a new monitor for it and everything. At that point, I'd recommend or I'd suggest that if you're coming to that $500 level, you can actually build a really, really nice emulation machine, and you can search the internet for instructions. There's probably dozens. But at that $500 price point, you could build something that was so far beyond the Arcade1Up, it would be embarrassing. And I've heard some people say that, getting the cabinet is the hard part or anything. I'm not going to tell you that it's easy to go buy an arcade cabinet, but I will tell you that if you search Craigslist right now and just type in the word arcade, unfortunately, you'll find a lot of Arcade1Ups going for $80 or $60, but you'll also find a lot of real arcade games that you can pick up between $50 and $150 that are in real cabinets, and some of them are going to be pretty good. And I would suggest that that's a better starting point. But again, the sticks, the buttons, the spinner, of course, just not quality. I think generally any company that released a game like this probably would have issued a couple recalls instead of trying to fix them through support, given that they didn't quite deliver what they said they were going to deliver. I do think that the Rampage issue on the Gauntlet should have been a recall worthy notice, because we are going to find cabinets later that still have the glitch. I think if this Galaxina ROM problem, if it does turn out to be a knockoff Galaxian that was just the wrong ROM was picked, I also think that that's a recall level issue. The spinner on the games on the deluxe cabinet, I do think that's another recall worthy issue. And ultimately, it's people are being sent new spinners that do the same thing. So on that issue, I don't see any real way that it's going to be rectified. And I think that those games will always play poorly on the Arcade1Up, and that's disappointing because I love those games. I spoke previously about the data corruption issue. It's, Arcade1Ups are having a lot of issues. It's no secret. You can search for them, and everyone is it seems like one of the big conversations that's trying to be had is what is the right price for these as they've been put on sale. I still would not feel great about spending more than $100 on just the parts that you're receiving. And they have been marked down below that. And obviously on Craigslist, there's various condition ones that you can already find for relative discount prices. I've also seen really hilarious commercial uses on Craigslist, trying to rent them out for parties, resell them with new illegal emulation. Pretty much everything that I hoped wouldn't happen to my Craigslist searches is happening, because as you might imagine, I have a permanent search for everyone that uses the word arcade in Craigslist so that I can see all the arcades that get listed. That's just irritating personally, but there have been a couple notifications of these popping up in commercial businesses. I think hopefully the people that walk up to a 4-foot arcade or whatever it is with the riser, if they go to a business, will quickly recognize that this is not at all something that should be in a business. But ultimately, guys, if you're having fun with it, I'm not here to ruin your fun. But what I am here to do is make sure that we have some facts on the table while we're discussing these units. Make sure that everyone understands some of the games that you're playing are infinitely better on the arcade. Some of the games that you're playing are, maybe kind of close. I think that the Galaga is pretty good on the Arcade1Up. The Galaxina obviously is bizarre and doesn't match any Galaxina. I think, that's pretty much every game that was on the deluxe cabinet is flawed in some way, whether it's Centipede or Asteroids. Maybe Asteroids is the best of them, but they're all pretty bad. And in general, I can't recommend buying these, certainly not at retail price. And just know also, if you buy one, you're almost certainly, no matter which unit you buy, having to call support. And I was just pulling up on the internet. There's someone here talking about having been on hold for 3 hours to try to get support. There's a YouTube video of someone waiting 45 or 50 minutes. While he's on hold, he recorded the whole thing, and eventually kind of got half answers and then walked away disappointed. It is a problematic system. This is not what we kind of expected it to be, which would be take it home, plug it in, it would work how it's supposed to. There are support issues on just about every single unit that has been made. There are game-breaking complaints on most of them, and this data corruption issue that seems to be coming. I don't know if it's limited to Street Fighter and Galaga or the different games that people have talked about, but it could be the case that we're going to see a lot of people out of that warranty period who have games stop working, and that's concerning. Hopefully, Tastemakers does the right thing and keeps the warranties active in terms of these issues that should probably just be recalled. So I just wanted to make a quick podcast. I wanted to go ahead and talk to y'all without a bunch of noise from other people, without a bunch of y'all feeling ganged up on. I love arcade games. I love arcade games probably as much as anyone in the world. I am, again, one of the greatest collectors that has been around. I love them, and I've spent my life's work so far bringing them to the public and letting them be played in original condition, no matter how rare, no matter how special. So I'll leave you with the comment that was left on the Free Play Arcade community group. That was the most liked on our Facebook page that of any comment last month or 2 months ago, which is $300 equals 30 visits to Free Play. You can take that $300, play the real games 30 times, and I'm going to wager there are quite a few Arcade1Up owners that will give up on their Arcade1Ups before they get those 30 plays. So that's it for this podcast. Feel free to trash me as much as you want. I do think that this is, if nothing else, there are a lot more people talking about arcades right now, for better or worse. So I'm Corey. I'm signing out, and I'll see y'all next time.